The Mississippi sun had a way of pressing down like it had something personal against you. At 9:13 a.m., the heat was rising in lazy waves off the asphalt of a dusty Shell gas station just off Highway 61. A few faded trucks idled nearby, country music humming faintly from one of them. As the world moved slowly, except for the two officers parked by the pump, sipping coffee and searching for something to notice. They noticed her. She pulled up in a gray Dodge SUV, unassuming, clean but not flashy. The woman who stepped out looked like someone's aunt from church, mid-50s, black, braided bun tucked under a simple ball cap, loose navy windbreaker, tan cargo pants, and sneakers. She walked with purpose, not arrogance. Calm, but not timid. She held herself like she wasn't lost, even though this wasn't her neighborhood. To Officers Brent Carter and Luke Harmon, that alone was enough. They watched her from their squad car as she entered the station. She exchanged pleasantries with the clerk, bought 2 bottles of water, an energy bar, and a coffee. Black, no sugar. She didn't loiter, didn't look around nervously. That bothered them. "She looked at you kinda hard," Brent said, squinting into the glare. "Nah," Luke replied. "She just got attitude. Bet she thinks we won't say nothing." They didn't need a reason. They just needed a moment. As the woman walked back to her car, Harmon stepped out first, adjusting his belt and straightening his vest. Brent followed, tapping the badge over his chest like it made his words law. "Excuse me, ma'am," Brent called out. She paused, mid-step, coffee still steaming in her hand. "Yes?" "We got a report of suspicious activity. Need to ask you a few questions." She glanced at the empty parking lot. "Suspicious activity? Here?" Luke stepped closer. "License and registration. Step away from the vehicle." She raised an eyebrow but didn't move. "I'm sorry, officer. Am I being detained?" Brent's tone shifted. "You can make this hard or easy." A pause. Then she placed the coffee carefully on the car roof, pulled a leather wallet from her back pocket, and opened it, slowly, deliberately. Inside was a Department of Defense identification, gold seal, photo, and the unmistakable rank, Major General. But they didn't look, or didn't care. Brent took the wallet, barely glancing. "Yeah, I've seen these fake IDs online." She took a slow breath. "That's a federal ID, officer. You might want to reconsider." Before she could finish, Luke grabbed her wrist. "No need to get hostile," he said, twisting her arm behind her back. She winced but didn't yell. "You're making a mistake." "Turn around. Hands behind your back," Brent barked. "You're resisting." She didn't fight, didn't curse. As the metal cuffs clicked tight around her wrists, her voice remained steady. "You might want to call your supervisor. I'm not who you think I am." Brent smirked. "Yeah? And who the hell are you?" "I am Major General Elena Bradford," she said. "United States Army." They laughed, loudly. Harmon leaned in. "Sure, and I'm the Secretary of Defense." A small crowd had started to gather, a gas station clerk, truckers, and a teenage boy filming from across the lot. The woman in cuffs stood silent, breathing through her nose. Not begging, not panicking, just waiting. Waiting for the chain of command. Major General Elena Bradford sat alone in a small, scuffed-up room at the back of the Greenville Police Department. Her wrists still bore faint red marks from the cuffs, and her uniform windbreaker now hung on the back of the plastic chair they'd thrown her into. The 2 officers who brought her in, Carter and Harmon, were somewhere outside, probably joking, maybe already shaping their version of events. She wasn't angry. Not yet. She was calculating. Because what they didn't understand, what they failed to ask, was why a 2-star general was in a gas station parking lot in rural Mississippi wearing civvies and buying black coffee. They didn't know she was on assignment. They didn't know she wasn't alone. They didn't know who was already listening. The moment she was forced into the back of that cruiser, Elena had triggered the emergency code embedded in her phone. Just 3 taps. No words needed. No noise was made. It activated a silent beacon, a military-grade distress signal that overrode all standard frequencies and shot straight to the Pentagon's Domestic Intelligence Security Division. That signal had one tag attached: flag officer detained, civilian law enforcement involved. At Fort McPherson, Georgia, 327 miles away, a red light blinked on a secure panel. Within 37 seconds, it had triggered 5 escalating alerts. At minute 2, a colonel had his phone ripped from sleep mode. At minute 4, a major at Northcom picked up a direct line. By minute 6, the name Elena Bradford had been flagged across the Department of Defense and FBI databases. By minute 10, retaliation had already been mobilized. Outside the police station, Carter leaned against the hood of his squad car, sipping a fresh iced tea, not a care in the world. Harmon stood nearby, phone in hand, browsing social media. Then the air changed. First came the low thumping, subtle at first like someone dropping heavy luggage down a staircase, then louder. Rhythmic. The dispatcher inside squinted toward the window, eyes widening. Out on Highway 61, 5 matte black SUVs moved in formation, unmarked but unmistakable. Behind them, a dark green Humvee followed closely. By the time the convoy reached the precinct lot, the entire station fell silent. Carter blinked, lowering his drink. What the hell? Doors opened in unison. From the lead SUV stepped a man with a silver eagle pinned to his chest, Colonel David Langston, head of the Rapid Domestic Response Task Force. Towering, stone-faced, voice forged on battlefields and briefings. He didn't look left or right. He went straight for the building. Harmon stepped in his path. "Sir, this is—" Langston didn't break stride. "Get out of my way, officer. That's not a request." Behind him came 6 armed military personnel in Class A uniforms and sidearms. Not for show. One of them carried a sleek black case. Inside the station, the chief, a paunchy white man with graying hair named Gerald Sims, looked up from his desk, mouth half open. Can I help y'all?" "You can stand down," Langston said. "Where's Major General Bradford?" Sims blinked. "Who?" Langston opened a folder and laid it flat on the counter. The name glared in 72-point bold. Emma G. and Elena A. Bradford, Domestic Strategic Liaison. Clearance level, Omega-5 active operations, DoD FBI Joint Task Force mission status, classified. Sims looked like he'd swallowed a rock. "She was brought in this morning," Langston said, voice tight. "Unlawfully detained by 2 of your officers." Sims stammered. We didn't know?" "I don't care what you didn't know," Langston snapped. "Where is she?" A young deputy pointed to the rear holding room. Room C." The door swung open with force, but Bradford didn't flinch. She looked up, nodded slightly. "Colonel." Langston returned the nod. "Ma'am, we're extracting you. Your clearance was flagged and escalated to Crisis Priority 1. Washington is watching." She stood slowly, straightening her sleeves. "I assume you've secured the precinct?" "Yes, ma'am. We're taking jurisdiction effective immediately." "Good. Then let's make it official." By the time she stepped out into the lobby, Elena Bradford looked nothing like the woman who had been arrested 2 hours earlier. Her shoulders squared, her gaze sharp. The authority around her was no longer invisible. It was undeniable. Carter and Harmon stood frozen near the break room. Bradford walked right up to them. "No fury. Just facts. You'll be placed on administrative leave pending federal investigation. You violated Article 138 of the Uniform Code by detaining a flag officer without cause. That's a felony." Harmon scoffed. "Lady, we didn't even know you were military." "And that's exactly the problem." Langston handed both men sealed envelopes. "You'll also be contacted by JAG and federal counsel. Until further notice, do not leave the state. Do not speak to the media. Do not contact each other." Carter's voice cracked. "Is this for real?" Bradford leaned in, voice soft but firm. "You put your hands on a general, officer. Welcome to the consequences." They thought it would go away. Chief Sims, Officer Carter, Officer Harmon. They truly believed that once the general left, things would calm down. That it was just a misunderstanding, a misstep, a wrist slap. They were wrong. It began within the hour. CNN broke the story first. Their headline was impossible to ignore. Breaking: Black female general handcuffed by local cops in alleged racial profiling incident. By noon, it was trending globally. By dinner time, it was war. The video that changed everything. The secret wasn't in what they did. It was in what was recorded. A teenage boy at the gas station had captured the entire arrest on his phone. A quiet bystander, too nervous to intervene, but smart enough to hit record. The footage was clear. Bradford is standing calmly. Carter yelling, "I don't care what you say, you're not walking away from this." Harmon grabbed her arm. The moment she said, "I am Major General Elena Bradford of the United States Army. Release me." And Carter smirking, "You're just another angry black woman making things up." That line alone exploded across the internet like a bomb. Within 24 hours, the video had over 58 million views. Celebrities reposted it, lawmakers condemned it, Retired generals gave interviews. Civil rights organizations issued statements. By morning, the story wasn't just viral, it was historic. Carter was suspended by 6:30 a.m. By 9, the mayor held a press conference, his eyes red, his voice trembling. "We are cooperating with federal authorities to fully investigate the incident involving Major General Bradford. We deeply regret the actions taken." Carter, meanwhile, was hiding. A crowd had gathered outside his home. Protesters, cameras, and drones in the sky. Signs reading, "We salute Bradford, fire Carter," lined the block. One woman in uniform stood in silence, saluting every hour on the hour. But the investigation moved faster than anyone expected, because this wasn't Carter's first incident, it was his fifth. 3 internal complaints for excessive verbal aggression, 1 for use of unnecessary force on a minority civilian. All swept under the rug. But not anymore. The Justice Department opened a civil rights inquiry. A federal subpoena uncovered damning body cam footage from prior incidents. And when journalists dug deeper, they found a pattern stretching back 6 years. The court date was set. He faced termination, criminal charges, and a possible civil suit for unlawful detention of a federal officer. And yet, none of that hit as hard as the letter delivered to his mailbox by certified courier. It read, "This is to inform you that as of this date, you are permanently disqualified from any federal law enforcement contracts, military service affiliations, and clearance-level access. Your name has been entered into the National Law Enforcement Disqualification Registry." Carter collapsed on his front porch. Officer Shelley Harmon didn't think she'd be targeted too. She wasn't the one shouting. She wasn't the one smirking. But in the video, she was the one cuffing Bradford. That was enough, because silence is complicity. She was removed from active duty within hours of the video's spread. When reporters camped outside her home, she told one of them, "I was just following orders." That only made things worse. Social media tore her apart. Hashtags like #JustFollowingOrders became satirical memes. Veterans posted side by side with soldiers who refused immoral orders. Within days, Harmon was fired, not just suspended. Her name became synonymous with cowardice. And worse still, a former black colleague at the department came forward anonymously, saying Harmon once used the phrase, "They all act entitled," during a traffic stop. She lost her badge, she lost her pension, and every department in the state blacklisted her resume before she could even press submit. Chief Sims tried to stay above the fray. He claimed ignorance, gave careful interviews, and insisted that our department respects all grounds. But 2 retired officers stepped forward, and they brought receipts. Emails from years prior show Sims ignored calls to address racial profiling, internal memos warning about Carter's behavior. He had done nothing. And so, Washington did something. On Friday morning, a letter arrived at Sims' desk from the Department of Defense's legal office. Effective immediately, you are barred from communication with all military installations, personnel, or federal oversight agencies pending review. Your command authority is suspended. You are instructed to cooperate with federal interviews regarding systemic misconduct under your leadership. He was forced to resign before sunset. For 5 days, Major General Alina Bradford said nothing publicly. Not one interview, no press statements, no tweets, until Sunday evening. She appeared live on 60 Minutes, in full-dress uniform, silver stars gleaming beneath studio lights. Calm, controlled, but undeniable. "I didn't come to Greenville to make headlines," she said softly. "I came to assess the readiness of local agencies to integrate with a national response unit. It was supposed to be discreet." The host nodded. "But you were arrested?" She took a breath. "I was profiled, dismissed, ignored. Not because I lacked credentials, not because I was out of line, but because I was a black woman who didn't look the part." The host leaned forward. "What happened next?" Bradford smiled faintly. "I followed the chain of command." The internet erupted in applause. Within a week, the Greenville Police Department lost over $12 million in federal funding. 6 officers resigned. Civil rights lawsuits stacked up on the courthouse steps. But not all the news was grim. Congresswoman Ayanna Clark introduced the Bradford Act, a new bill mandating mandatory anti-bias training and national transparency on all federal detentions by local law enforcement. And across the country, schools, military units, and civic groups began inviting Alina Bradford to speak. She never accepted a speaking fee. She ended every talk the same way. I didn't destroy anyone's career. They did that themselves. I just made sure it didn't happen quietly. After that fateful call to the Pentagon, the power map of Montgomery County started to shift. The first sign wasn't mass terminations. It was a deadly silence. The police department fell into an uneasy hush. Inside the station, the air was tight. Officers deleted messages. Emails mysteriously vanished from the server. Whispered conversations stopped when someone walked by. Suspicion crept into the ranks. Who was going to be named? Who was going to fall? 3 days later, Sergeant Caldwell, the man who personally cuffed General Bradford, was called into a closed-door meeting. When he emerged, his face was pale, lips pressed tight. Word spread fast. He'd been suspended indefinitely. 2 others on the patrol team followed. Same room, same result. Then came the media storm. A leaked radio recording hit the local news like a thunderbolt. It captured the officer's chatter during the traffic stop. One female officer's voice crackled through the static. Looks like she's pretending to be some kind of general. Get a load of the way she's dressed. Probably just another old black lady pulling the special treatment card. The tape went viral. In under 24 hours, it was replayed on CNN, MSNBC, The Hill, and even quoted at a Pentagon press conference. Public outrage exploded. But it wasn't just civil rights activists this time. It was veterans, retired generals, female soldiers, and lawmakers. They stood up. They marched. They called for justice for a woman who had given nearly 40 years to her country and had been treated like a criminal in broad daylight because of her skin color. At an emergency session held at the state courthouse, Senator Melissa Klein, who had once served with Bradford on the National Defense Oversight Committee, delivered a scathing speech. If a major general can be handcuffed in the street without provocation, what happens to the black single mother on her way to work? What happens to a teenager in a hoodie? Her words lit a fire in the chambers. Under mounting pressure, a bipartisan ethics committee called for an immediate investigation into racial profiling and abuse of power within Montgomery law enforcement. That was the moment the system started to crack. Captain Kyle Matheson, head of patrol operations and the man who'd ordered Bradford held for further verification, was placed under formal investigation. Rumors swirled that he'd been named in multiple prior complaints: abuse of power, misconduct toward undocumented immigrants, threats toward protesters. But internal affairs had buried them. Not this time. Matheson's collapse was swift. His resignation letter leaked to the press. It read, in part, "I didn't intend for things to spiral. I followed the procedure. But if that hurts this country, I accept the consequence." It was too little, too late. 6 officers were suspended. 3 were dismissed. The female officer who'd first escalated the stop resigned the morning she was to be stripped of her badge. Fear gripped the department. Young officers, some who had quietly watched the arrest unfold, sent anonymous letters to Internal Affairs expressing their disgust. One letter read, "That day changed me. I didn't sign up for this." Another, "They always told us to protect the public. What if we are the threat?" The cultural rot was no longer hidden. It was exposed. And far beyond the department, the echoes rippled. A retired general, now head of military ethics, issued a national memo. Effective immediately, all branches shall treat misconduct toward active or retired service members by law enforcement as a matter of national concern. Trust had been broken, but something new was being built in its place. The dust settled slowly in Montgomery County. Weeks passed. The media glare faded, the hashtags cooled, and the next scandal swept into the headlines. But for those who lived it, for those who saw General Veronica Bradford step out of handcuffs with her chin held high, the moment never left them. Because something shifted that day, not just in policy, not just in protocol, but in people. General Bradford never filed a civil lawsuit. She never appeared on late-night talk shows or wrote a book about the ordeal. She simply went back to work. 3 weeks after the incident, she stood before a new graduating class at Fort Benning. Young officers in crisp uniforms, eyes sharp with anticipation. Her speech didn't mention the arrest. It didn't need to. Instead, she looked at each cadet and said slowly, "If power ever makes you forget how to listen, give it up before it's taken from you." She paused, then added, "I wasn't hurt by what happened. I've faced bullets in places where people prayed I wouldn't survive. What hurts me is knowing the people sworn to protect this country can't recognize the people who built it." That line echoed through the room like a thunderclap. Back in Montgomery, the fallout continued, but so did the rebuilding. A community task force on policing and race relations was formed, co-chaired by two unlikely allies: a black pastor who had once led protests outside City Hall, and a retired white police officer who had quietly resigned after the Bradford incident. Together, they started hosting monthly forums. Open mic, no cameras, just the truth. At one forum, a teenage girl, no older than 15, stood up with trembling hands and said, "I thought wearing a uniform meant you were safe, but now I think the uniform hides who you are." Her words were met not with denial, but with nods. Something had cracked, and light was finally getting in. Sergeant Troy Miller, the officer who had handcuffed Bradford, was sentenced to 6 months of probation, community service, and mandatory racial bias training. Many said it was too light. But something happened that no one expected. He showed up to his first community service event at a local veterans shelter, unshaven, anxious, silent. And then he saw her. General Bradford, volunteering. She was helping organize meals for homeless vets that afternoon, handing out sandwiches and quiet smiles. She didn't flinch when she saw him. She didn't turn away. He approached her, heart pounding. "Ma'am, She raised a hand gently. "Son, I don't need your apology. I need your change." That was it. No grand speeches, no courtroom drama. But according to a fellow volunteer, Miller showed up every weekend after that, sometimes early, always quiet. And 6 months later, he didn't stop. A mural now sits on the side of a community center in Montgomery, painted by a local black artist, funded by anonymous donors. It's titled, "The Oath Remains." It shows a black woman in military dress walking forward, hands free, head high, while shadows of broken handcuffs fall behind her. In the background, faceless figures of officers watch from a distance, some with shame, some with awakening. Underneath it reads, "Your service does not expire, neither does your dignity." The arrest of General Veronica Bradford didn't spark a revolution. It didn't end systemic racism. It didn't cleanse every badge or courtroom or jail cell, but it did something rare. It held up a mirror to a nation still struggling with the difference between uniformity and justice, between authority and character, between the law and what's right. And somewhere in quiet corners of precincts and city halls, that mirror still hangs, waiting for someone brave enough to look.